We're gonna see if my little DIY solar farm here and this thing is enough to power my entire house. So welcome to the Do-It-Yourself Dad channel and welcome to Tech Tuesdays, where we take a bit of technology and give you all the pros and cons of it so you can make an informed decision whether this is right for you. In this video, we're gonna be checking this out. This is the Zendure V6400. This is the largest power station I have ever played with by a long shot. Now, I always want to be transparent with my viewers. I was sent this unit for free for testing, but I am not being paid for this video, and the opinions are my own, and you will see that at the end of the video in all of the pros and cons that I go over. Additionally, I will have a link down below if you want to check this thing out. It is an affiliate link. We do get a small percentage of each sale, and we do appreciate the support. But, like I said, stay tuned to the end so you can make a decision before you go and buy one. This thing is so big that it actually arrived here on a pallet, and those little wheels on it have motors in it to push it around because the thing weighs about 130 pounds. Now that weight is all the batteries inside here. This thing has some pretty big hefty claims. We're gonna see if it lives up to it. It's got your regular 110 sockets, and then over here, it's actually got a 120 30 amp and a 240 60 amp. So in theory, you could plug this thing into an RV, run the air conditioning, or if you've got something like this, you can actually plug it in and backfeed your entire house. Now, I've done this before on the channel with other generators, and they've all worked to varying degrees. This thing is the most powerful, so I want to see if this thing can actually power everything I'd want to power in there, except for the spa. In a power outage, I'm really not worried about the spa. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna put this thing through all of its paces, and then at the end of the video, we're going to do a whole pro and con so you can make a decision whether this thing is the right solution for your house or for camping or whatever you need. So now it's time for the big test. We're gonna try to run my house on it. Now that transfer switch runs 6 of the circuits in my house. We have a smaller house, but we're running a couple aquariums, my koi pond that I need to keep those guys alive, and a refrigerator, as well as all the lights, the routers, the modems, and our home office. So it's a smaller house, but we do have a lot of power needs. Now what I've always done in power outages, I've kicked it off a generator, but then I go to the house and I shut down everything that's really consuming a lot of power. I'm not gonna do that right now. We're just gonna flip everything over and see what it does. So we've got our transfer switch plugged in here and coming down into our 30 amp right there. We've got everything set up correctly, so let's start kicking over some circuits, and while we're at it, we'll monitor what it's doing on the phone. So my normal process when I flip things over is I just go one circuit at a time. That gives the inverter time to catch up. So I've got my entire house now, where all the necessary circuits running on this thing. And all that has resulted in a total power consumption of just under a kilowatt. Now this is gonna change a little bit as the refrigerator cycles on and off, but I've seen it really never get above about 1400, and right now that's giving us 4.4 hours of energy. So what that means is when Edison does us the favor of shutting off our power because it's windy out, which they keep trying to do this year, it's usually only for a couple hours, which means I can do that without ever having to start up the gas generator, which is nice. It also means I have a backup if something happens to the gas generator, or vice versa. Now, if I plug that thing into my solar panels and I have really good sunshine, I could potentially double how much that thing is actually pushing out and how long it can run for. I also didn't turn off anything in the house. If I go around and turn off lights and things like that, and things that we don't need, we can conserve a lot more power and get more life out of it. So now let's head inside. I'll show you what all this thing is powering inside the house. Now, coming inside, I have most of my lights powered through the transfer switch, and my kitchen lights are now on. It's also feeding power to my fridge. This was one of the big concerns when I installed that transfer switch, was I wanted to keep the food and not trash. So my big concerns with that was enough lighting to keep the house going, food, keep my fish alive, and keep the home office running. You can see in here I've got my ceiling lights in my dining room running, and then coming here into my living room, I have over my doorway, I have a fancy blue light there, but there's one of the aquariums that we have going. Right now the TV is off. I have one of my lights over there on, and then I can kick on the light right there behind me. Now over there in the corner, that's where I have all of my modems, my routers, my home automation stuff, and those are actually hooked into an uninterruptible power supply. So if the power does kick off, they keep running, but then once that battery kicks on, it takes over. So the battery is right now running everything that is inside my kind of home hub over there. Now, before we pull more power out of it, let me show you how you can put power back into it. Now, this plug on the right side, this is the first one of these that's had one of these plugs. This is actually an electric vehicle plug. So if you've got an EV setup, you can really charge this thing quick with that. Now, over here on the left, you've got your standard AC inputs for your wall current, and it actually has an option for fast and slow charging that you can switch right there. And then down below here on the left side, that is if you're going to stack additional battery packs onto this thing. Another method of charging is solar. And what's really nice about this one is I've run into other systems in the past where the plugs are proprietary, and therefore you really struggle getting to plug anything into it that will actually work correctly. With these ones, you can use any solar panel as long as you can plug it into the back. So what I've got here, I've got a whole array. I've got an anchor panel, a EcoFlow panel, a Vigor Pool panel, and I think that's an EcoFlow panel in the back. And that's all I could actually fit on my adapter. I actually have a few more, I got a problem. So this is the adapter that I'm running it into, and these are all standard XT60 connectors. Now there are a couple different kinds of connectors that you'll see a lot of times on these panels. These are the other connectors that come off of my Vigor Pool panel, but most of my other ones have relied on these XT60 style connectors. And then if you're doing kind of standard solar wiring, you're going to have kind of these, but you can get adapters to go back and forth for everything. Now coming back to this one, this gives you the ability to run 5 panels in parallel. These are not in series in here, they're in parallel. And then it runs out to a XT60. Now if you notice here on the back here, it's actually an XT90 connector. So what I've done is I've run an XT90 to an XT60 adapter, and I'm running the two in there. So you can get adapters and pretty much adapt just about any panel into this. And right now we're dealing with kind of the late fall sun. So out of all those panels right now, I'm getting about 450 to 500 watts input into that thing. The house, if you remember, was consuming a little under 1,000, depending upon what I was loading, which means with that array right there, I could supplement about 50% of my power. So with that box being able to run 4.5 hours, I should be able to run 8 or 9 hours during the day. Now what that also means is whenever I finally get around to putting the solar panels on that trailer, which I know I've been talking about on the channel for a long time now, I'll be able to plug everything right into that box and be able to plug the Zendure right into the main lead going into my camper, and I'll have everything all set without having to put extra batteries now on my camper. And that's all well and good if it'll actually run everything in my camper. So now we have to do the air conditioning test. So right now I've got the camper hooked in right here, and there's actually 2 different modes. There's one for RV where this is now acting as a 120 30 amp. Okay, so now we're inside the camper, my home away from home. I've got it plugged in and I've got all my circuits powered up, including the microwave, the lights, and the sockets and everything. I want to come over to the AC unit here. Now I don't have my soft start hooked up, but let's monitor what goes on the phone because it'll show us what's happening inside the battery. So let's kick it over to aircon right there. And it died. Now, one thing I do want to note with this thing is that, oh, looks like it just reset. I just heard the beep in my microwave, so it sounds like the unit just reset. Why don't we try it again? So I got the fan running. We're going to come all the way up on that fan. Ah, and it kicked on. Okay, I don't know. So I guess second time's a charm. Now, I did have a couple times where it did not start, so I don't know if I would necessarily trust this if I was camping as my only way to run my air conditioner. One thing to mention, when it was running, it was consuming 1.2 kilowatts, and with that thing, because it's got to kick on that compressor, that is a sudden surge of a massive amount of power. So that was probably the issue, because now it's having no problem running it. I got ice cold air coming out of it. But your mileage may vary, it just is going to depend on your situation. You could also run a soft start, and running my soft start on this thing, I have an inline soft start, I was having no problems. And I guess one more thing that's worth mentioning, I'm going to put a screenshot over here of what I'm seeing on my phone, but right now it's telling me I have 3 hours and 15 minutes remaining. So I can run this thing at full bore for 3 hours and 15 minutes, which would be plenty because usually I just use it to cool down the trailer and then I shut it off. And that's without solar. So with solar, you'd be going a little bit further. You're not going to be able to be putting 1.4, 1.2 kilowatts of solar on the roof of a trailer this size and pushing it into that. So it won't be long-term sustainable, but you could at least, I guess, cool down your trailer with this thing. And here's the view of the screen on the outside. We're doing like 1,300 to 1,400 watts, which is 1.4 kilowatts of power. We're up at 96%, and it's given us that same, now we're reading out at 3.1 hours of charge remaining in this thing running the air conditioning at full speed. So next up, I want to try something else that's going to have a kind of a bigger load when it starts up. This is a compound miter saw. I got one more thing I want to try torturing this thing with. And that test would be this one. We're going to do a little bit of light welding. I'm just going to run a quick bead on this plate here. Don't judge me. I'm a terrible welder. It's more just to test out this thing. So it's working. It's struggling a little bit, which doesn't really surprise me. I can hear the motor kind of surging as the arc makes connection. So it's working. It is serving enough power to it. But what I want to do now is I'm going to do another one real quick. I want to put the camera on this so you can actually see how much this thing is pushing out. Now, since we're already out here in the garage, let's take a moment to take a look at the app. Now, this thing has most of its controls here on the screen, and that's actually pretty nice because I've dealt with some other units where everything had to be done through the app, which is a pain if you don't have your phone on you or you don't have it set up. With this thing, you can still do everything you'd want it to do in the app through the screen and the buttons on the front. So that is a definite plus. But let's go through all the features in this thing real quick. Now, when you download the app, you do have to set up an account, and then you can connect to it either via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. It's another nice thing because if you're in a camping situation where you don't have Wi-Fi, you can Bluetooth to it. So in the app here, I'm going to pop it open. And you can go through a lot of different features on board. Now, it does have the device sharing and the network settings and the instruction manual thing. I'm not going to go into those because that's stuff that really doesn't go into the function of this thing. But here is what's nice, is you can set the charge limits, and you can also set how fast or slow you want it to charge. Now, you'd want to do this for a couple different reasons. One, the faster you charge one of these things, the faster you are going to degrade the batteries. But the other thing is, if you have this thing plugged into a 15 amp circuit, you're going to want to set it right there. But if you have other things plugged into that circuit, you might want to set it lower. So I have it set down at 800 just because where I'm at, I'm usually plugging this thing into things with other things on the line. You can also set a discharge limit, and I have it set to stop at 10%. That way I have a little bit of reserve battery if we're out camping and I need it. And then there's the AC output mode. Now, this is what I was playing around with before. Now, it has two different modes. It has one mode up here. This is the 120/240. And you can see there it actually shows which outlets are running the 120 and which ones are running 240. Now, you can also come down into RV mode. And in the RV mode, it's now doing a 30 amp out at 60 hertz. And that's what I was running my trailer on, and that's what I run the house on. I really don't have a need for the other mode the way I have things set up. And then there's a bunch of other settings in here. The screen standby mode, that's how long it takes to time off. There's the automatic shutdown, quiet charging. This thing does have cooling fans on it, and the fans can be quite loud. So if you turn that on, it will slow the charging rate down so it doesn't have to spool up all those fans. You can select all your different AC inputs on here, and this one, I can actually turn this on or off depending on what I need to do. And there's also the firmware update. So there's all the basic things in here in settings. Now, if we go back in here, I can turn on and off everything. So just turned off my AC, it's back on. I can turn my DC outlets on. That would be my cigarette lighter adapter outlets and all my USB stuff. And this is kind of fun. If you're camping or you're in a power outage situation, it's got all sorts of different lights. So you can turn on and off all the lights here. And there's different modes as well. There's camping mode where it's more of an amber. We can have a party and it'll go crazy. If you're in an emergency, you have a flash out SOS even. So there's a lot of different kind of neat modes here in the light mode. This would really come in handy if you were out camping or you were in a power outage situation. Now, the one thing that I thought was pretty quirky and funny in this thing is this thing weighs 130 pounds and it's hard to move around. So you can actually come in here and drive it. Now, I did mention before that the back wheels will propel it when you're pulling it, but you can actually go in here and drive it around. Now, if you're like me, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, can I ride it? Well, let's find out. Don't tell them I'm doing this to their toy here. Apparently you can. It's struggling, but I'm also heavy. And this is definitely, losing control. This is definitely not what the manufacturer had intended with this. So, you can ride it. Wouldn't recommend it, but you could. Now, what it's really intended for is if you have to haul this thing around. Say you got to bring it up a hill. It weighs 130 pounds. So as I pull it here, the motor kicks in. And you can see here, it's going to go on its own until I put some drag on it. So it's really more meant to assist you when you're having to haul this thing around. It doesn't have the assist going backwards, but when I'm coming forwards, you give it a little tug, and now it's kind of going on its own. I'm not doing anything. So now it's time to go over all of the pros and cons. Now that I've used this thing, I've used it through a power outage, and I've tried to power a bunch of stuff around the house. So we're gonna go over the pros first, and then the cons. So the first pro, and probably the most obvious pro, is the capacity of this thing. This thing has 6,400 watt hours of storage. That is almost 3 times how much my next largest one of these that I've ever played around with has. So the capacity of this thing is massive, which gives it the ability to get you through a power outage, even if it's a longer power outage. We saw before that we could run my house for maybe a little over 4 hours with this thing. And that was with all my stuff on. Usually I would go around and turn off a lot of stuff that I don't need during a power outage, and I didn't even bother. So I'd imagine we can actually get some more out of it. The next big pro is the versatility of it. Now, what I don't have here is the additional battery packs. You can get additional battery packs and stack them on this thing and increase the capacity. And you can actually increase the capacity quite a bit. It's really more a matter of how much you need and how much you're willing to spend to get that additional capacity. Now, another pro is ease of use. I've played around with a lot of these power systems, and a couple of them that I've played around with have almost no functionality on here. Everything has to be done through the phone. And as much as I love technology, I can't stand that. I want to have something where if I don't have my phone, or my phone is dead, or I don't have access to the internet or anything like that, I can still use it. And this thing, pretty much everything you'd want to do is accessible right on the screen here on the front. You don't have to mess around with the app if you don't want to. It also has a bunch of different sockets depending upon what you're trying to run. It has your regular 15 amp sockets, then it's got your 30 amp socket, and then it also has, when you pop in here, the 240. So you can run 240 stuff on this thing as well. So there's actually a lot of different stuff you can run off this, and I haven't had a system that has all that. I have one other one that is a 30 amp, but it doesn't do 240. So that's pretty impressive with this system that it can do that. Now, I initially thought the powered wheels on this thing were kind of gimmicky until I tried to roll it up my driveway. And I can roll it up my driveway, but if I'm not home and say my teenager has to do it, it's gonna be a tax to get that thing up the driveway or up any sort of a hill. So having those motors is really nice. The other thing is if you're gonna stack batteries on top of this thing, because you can mount more on top, the weight's gonna keep going up and up and up. And the fact that it pushed me around, and I weigh 180 pounds, it pushed me around, that tells me you could stack at least 1 or 2 more batteries on top of this and it would still be able to propel the weight. Now, I didn't even push the capacity on what this thing can charge solar with. I ran a couple of my smaller panels through a connector. This thing can handle a heck of a lot more than that. It can actually handle up to 3,000 watts and 150 volts input through that solar input. I don't have enough panels to even come close to testing that, but it does mean that if I plaster the roof of my trailer with panels, which I keep talking about on this channel, I can plug it straight into this and not have to worry. Now, in addition to having all the AC outputs, it also has a bunch of different DC outputs. It's got all your outputs here for USB and USB Type-C, and it has the higher wattage USB Type-C. It actually will up to 100 watts, which a lot of the other ones don't, which means if you have laptops or more power-hungry devices that you want to charge with USB Type-C, you can do that. Now, you may have noticed that on the back of this thing, it does not have a cigarette lighter port. It does actually have one though. It's hidden around the side, but it does have a 12-volt cigarette lighter port. So if you've got those devices as well, it's got that. It's just over here on the side, not on the back on the main panel. And my final pro will also kind of lead into the cons. So hear me out on this one. These things are expensive. They're $4,500 before panels. When you compare that to a gas generator, which is going to cost you $800 to $1,000, maybe a little bit more if you get a Honda, these are much more expensive than a gas generator. However, if you're using this thing on a camping trip, a lot of campgrounds have quiet hours, and you'll hit a point where if you want to microwave some popcorn in your trailer, you're out of luck if you need to run a generator. This thing isn't a generator. There's no gas involved. It is almost dead quiet. But now we're going to roll right into the cons, and the first one is that price I just talked about. It's $4,500, and that's for this model. They have a smaller capacity one, but that's $4,500 for this thing without any solar panels. And to get enough solar panels to really do this thing justice, if you're going to use this in an emergency situation, you're probably going to want to spend about $1,000 on solar panels. So you're looking at about $5,500 just to get this thing up and running with panels. And that's without expansion batteries. The expansion batteries also cost more money. So this thing is not cheap. The next major con, and we saw it on the air conditioner, it doesn't have immediate power. If you're really having a large draw, it takes this thing a while to spool up and deliver that power. And if you have a device that needs it immediately, it causes issues. For how big it is and how much it's supposed to be able to push out, it still can't do what my $800 generator can do when it comes to running my air conditioner in my trailer. The last con, and it's kind of a nitpicky thing, is the app. Now, I did mention you don't really need the app, but I do like to be able to control things remotely, especially if we're camping. If this thing is sitting outside or in the bed of my truck, I like to be able to just hit it from inside the camper. The app, you can Bluetooth to it, which is nice. You don't have to go over Wi-Fi. However, you need an account. And here's my problem with that. I don't like apps where you need to sign up for an account, give over your information, make up a password so you can forget that password later. I don't like devices that require that. I don't see why you need an account to log into this thing, at least locally through Bluetooth. So, say I'm out in the desert, I'm camping, this thing logged out, which it did to me during the making of this video. I now can't log into it because I don't have internet access, because I'm in the middle of nowhere, to get into the app just so I can Bluetooth to this thing. I don't get it. They should put a workaround in there. I really wish they would. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you like our Tech Tuesday series. We really try to give honest, unbiased reviews of stuff like this so you can make informed purchasing decisions if this is something that you're looking for. Now, if you have questions about this thing, I'm always happy to answer questions down in the comments. So throw a question on down there. I'm usually in there every couple days answering those questions. Now, if you enjoyed this series or you enjoyed this video, give it a great big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so it'll let you know when we put out more videos just like this. And of course, thanks for watching.